Welcome to Capitol Hill. Today, the Prime Minister got up close and personal with herself, telling the National Press Club that she's reserved, that she's shy, and that she usually lets her decisions speak for themselves. But she was speaking today for what she calls the biggest reform of this government, and that's the decision to put a tax on carbon. She's in a fight for her political life, but has that battle become a little too bruising? Joining me to discuss the day's events are National Senator Fiona Nash and Green Senator Larissa. Welcome to you both.
Thanks, Lyndal.
First to the Prime Minister's address to the National Press Club, where she spoke a little bit about her inner personal life.
I've brought with this a sense of personal reserve to the most public of professions, and the rigours of politics have reinforced my innate style of holding a fair bit back, of hanging pretty tough. If that means people's image of me today is one of steely determination, I understand that, and I understand why. But I don't forget where I came from, why I'm here, or what I've learned along the way. I don't forget only high.
Fiona, is it a good idea to let the public in occasionally?
Oh, I think we all are who we are. A cynic might say the timing of this particular opening up might be a little interesting, but I think the fact is it doesn't matter if someone's yelling at you when they're talking about the carbon tax or if they're crying when they're telling you about the carbon tax. The facts are still the same, and the Australian people have a lot of reservations about it and really don't want to see a carbon tax.
Larissa, it does seem like the Prime Minister does feel the public don't know enough about her, but the success of the carbon tax and the ETS emissions trading scheme, which will follow it, largely rest, don't they, on the government's ability to sell it?
Well, look, I think the government's got a difficult job. Obviously, in a minority government, the public aren't used to a Prime Minister needing to negotiate outcomes. So I think Julia Gillard is really under the pump in that regard, and it's nice to see a bit more emotion from her, I think, and I think the Australian people are probably pleased to see that as well. But look, this is a good outcome. We've got finally some action on climate change that many people have been wanting for a very long time, and I think that once we see this scheme coming down the line, people will really be backing it, and they'll see the benefits that will flow from it.
But your party, the Greens, are firmly in the carbon tax cart with the government. If the government's job at selling it and convincing the public doesn't go well, the reform's at risk, isn't it?
Well, look, I don't think so. I think that we have reached an agreement between the Multi-Party Climate Committee members that will reflect the parliamentary support for this package. So, of course, it's important to bring the people with you, but I think as more and more facts come out and as people take the time to investigate how it will affect them personally and see those benefits for the future for their own kids and grandkids, I think really the public will get behind this and really embrace it.
Fiona, you've been travelling about the state of New South Wales this week, arguing the Coalition's case against the carbon tax. I understand you're getting some, what you would see as positive feedback, but this is a very long road. Can you sustain that for 2 years?
Well, it is a long road, but we certainly can sustain it because it's really important. One of the things that's been coming through travelling round is the fact that the people now realise out there that the rest of the world is not implementing and not moving to implement a carbon tax the way Australia is. So they really understand that for all this pain, it's not going to change the climate one little bit. We only emit 1.5% of the world's emissions, and while the rest of the world's not on board, we've got all this pain for no change to the climate whatsoever. And I think they really understand that, and that's why they're questioning and why we're seeing so much emotion, I guess, because they simply think there is no point to doing this. Even the most rusted-on people who believe that man's causing global warming are starting to understand that this carbon tax isn't going to change the climate.
If we could move on, still staying with the Prime Minister, there's been some commentary occasionally that being female has changed or is behind some of the way that she's dealt with in public. Larissa, do you think being female in politics is more difficult?
Well, look, certainly we don't have equal representation yet in our parliaments, and that's something that the Greens are really looking forward to, those numbers evening up. Certainly in the Greens we have more women than men, so we're doing pretty well in that regard. But look, I think it's about being open and listening to people and being friendly, and you can be that irrespective of your gender. As Fiona said, we are who we are, and it's our job to communicate our policies to the people, and it's our job to listen to the people and their feedback and their concerns, and I think you can do that irrespective of your gender.
Fiona, do you think Julia Gillard gets some attacks or criticism she wouldn't get if she was a man?
No, I think she gets the attacks and criticisms because she's putting forward really bad policy. I think no matter if she had a pair of pants on and was a bloke, she'd be getting the same response from the Australian people. Because one of the things coming through, again, travelling around this week particularly, is people are really, really annoyed that before the last election she said there would be no carbon tax, and now the Prime Minister is giving them a carbon tax. And the thing that upsets them is they genuinely believed her when she said it before the last election, that they wouldn't be one. And a lot of them based their vote on that. And I think that's why we're seeing so much emotion now, because they feel like they've been duped in a way, that she said one thing, she's now doing another. And with the government's track record, they just don't believe that the government can implement this type of program anyway, with the track record of BER and Pink Bats and Grocery Watch and Cash for Clunkers, and not any ability at all to manage the asylum seekers, no ability to manage the live export issue. They just question how the government can even deliver this as they move along.
Larissa, does the emotion in the debate surprise you?
Oh no, absolutely not. But I think the debate has not been helped, and people's emotion levels have not been helped by the unfortunate remarks and the tenor of the debate coming from the opposition. I think the scaremongering that Tony Abbott in particular has been rolling out is really not helpful. He's frightening people unnecessarily, and it's not based on appropriate facts. And I think it's to the great detriment of this place that the tenor of the debate has degenerated so much. I understand that people feel strongly about that, and that's fine, but we as representatives of the people need to always make sure that we're staying calm and communicating clearly, and not just unnecessarily scaremongering. I mean, he's using this to score political points, and he's frightening people in the process, and I think that's really wrong.
Fiona, do you have any views on the tenor, on the nature, the way the debate is conducted?
It's not at all surprising to see this sort of emotion, because we saw it 2 years ago when we had the initial debate about the emissions trading scheme, and I can remember over 4 days getting about 3,000 emails of people who were so concerned about this emissions trading scheme coming in. So this is nothing new. But it's interesting, Larissa uses the term that Tony Abbott and we're all scaremongering. I really picked up the Labor line there, so we do obviously have a Labor Greens government pushing the agenda here. They're all saying the same thing now.
We can make our own lines up. Thanks anyway, Fiona.
Interesting they reflect the governments. But it's extraordinary that they keep saying we're scaremongering. The coalition is out there putting out the facts. Now, there is no two ways about the fact that a lot of these costs are going to get passed on. While there is some attempt at some of this compensation, so many of those costs are still going to get passed on. Now, that is not scaremongering, that is just a fact, and I think perhaps they should stop suggesting that and maybe just stick to the facts themselves.
If we could go now to the debate over phone hacking in Britain, the Prime Minister said today that she's open to the Parliament having a look at the question of media regulation. Your leader, Bob Brown, has called for a Senate inquiry into media regulation and media ownership. And indeed today he did suggest that he had been cautioned about his use of phones in the past.
When I have journalists say you should be careful what you say on your own telephone, then I'm not a techno whiz.
Have you been told that?
I have been told that, and I'm not a tech. In the last few days, I'm not a techno whiz, but I am careful. But should I have to be?
Who do you believe is listening?
I don't believe anybody is, but I'm saying I've had a journalist put that to me because they were more technologically savvy than me, and then I find out that the law may have a loophole in it which allows for hacking.
Larissa, Bob Brown has raised this question about a journalist suggesting to him to be careful of his phone use, but there's no real evidence, is there, that the sort of practices we've seen of Britain have happened in Australia?
Well, certainly we don't have that evidence as yet. I don't have that evidence. But it begs the question of the regulation of the media. Print media is not covered by any regulatory body. Of course, TV and radio are with ACMA, but newspapers aren't. So I don't know why they get special treatment here, and I think we need to have an inquiry to look at, is self-regulation working? And I mean, particularly the other issues is, of course, ownership. In my home state of Queensland, we don't have a great deal of choice in the newspapers that we buy. it's all Murdoch press. Now, you know, that's fine if that's what you want to read, but the point is there is no option. So I think we really need to have a look through the Senate process, through the inquiry process, to see, is that really what Australians want? Can we do better? Can we have more diversity in media ownership? And can we have better regulatory oversight to make sure that things that we saw happen with News of the World don't ever happen here?
Fiona, do you think there needs to be a look at media regulation? There've been plenty of looks in the past at things like cross-ownership laws. Does regulation need another bit of scrutiny?
Well, I think the people in the country and across the world expect a certain level of behaviour from journalists, and I think we've seen that, the reaction that we've seen in the UK. So there's an expectation that there will be an ethical level of journalism, and I think by and large in this country we have it. I certainly haven't seen any evidence, as Larissa has said, that there are untoward practices. But we do need to make sure that it is appropriate, and you know, we'll certainly consider looking at things if there needs to be a greater degree of investigation into those practices and whether or not they are appropriate.
Finally today, Greenpeace protesters broke into a CSIRO experimental farm in Canberra and destroyed a crop of genetically modified wheat. Larissa, your party has condemned attacks on scientists, on climate change scientists. Do you similarly condemn this attack on research?
Well, look, we don't support criminal activity, but I think this point really shows how strongly people feel about genetically modified crops and the danger that it poses to our Australian farmers. So I think it really is a symbol of the concern out there in the community, and we'll certainly be pushing for greater powers.
But aren't there other ways to express your concern without going to this level and destroying research?
Well, yes, there are, and that's why I'm a representative, for example, because I've made the choice to try and make a difference within this capacity. But this is a free country. People can choose to demonstrate their passions in the way that they so choose. I don't condone criminal activity, but then I wasn't out there spraying those crops. All I'm saying is I think it sends a message that we need to be looking more closely at the long-term impacts of GM crops, and that this is an issue that the community is concerned about, and there are valid environmental concerns behind this.
But people also, you know, some people question climate change science, aren't they? Well within their rights to question it.
Oh, sure, absolutely. I mean, people are free to hold their own views, and I really am excited when people have taken the time to look at a bit of the science and a bit of the facts and have formed their own views. So, look, we welcome that. This is a free country. Aren't we lucky to live here?
Fiona, is genetically modified crops accepted in amongst the agricultural community, or is there still a level of concern about them?
Well, there's certainly a great degree of acceptance among the community. There are some concerns out there in the community, there's no doubt about that. I hardly think a couple of people breaking into CSIRO means they're representative of people out there in the community that have concerns about this, and I actually think it's appalling. I would no sooner go and break into somebody's house because I didn't like their practices in the house than I would, you know, go to the moon. So why should it even be slightly acceptable that these people break into the CSIRO and do this? The point about it is scientific research. Now, we need to know whether or not these genetically modified practices are acceptable, whether they'll work. When we're looking at the issues of food security, a global food task going to increase by 2050, when we're looking at health issues, we need to make sure the research is there, and that was what was being done, and it was just a reprehensible act by these people.
And that's where we'll have to leave it. Larissa Waters and Fiona Nash, thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks
very much,
Lyndal.
Lyndal.
And thank you for being with Capitol Hill today. Join us again tomorrow.